the process of forming ions and also about ionic bonding. So the very first thing we of course need to know is what we mean by an ion. So an ion is formed when an atom gains extra electrons or loses electrons. It could be 1 electron, it could be 2 electrons, it could be 3 electrons. So let's look at some examples of this. So let's look firstly at lithium. So I'm going to draw the electron configuration for lithium, which means the way the electrons are arranged. So I'm going to look on my periodic table and I'm going to see that lithium has 3 electrons, and I know that the first shell contains 2 electrons and the second shell will have the third electron, so just 1. We could, if we wanted to, write the configuration 2, 1. So now it's going to lose an electron. So it's going to end up looking like this. Lithium, 1, 2, and that electron is going to have been lost. It's going to have gone somewhere else. So what happens now? Well, it's lost an electron, and electrons have a negative charge. So it's lost a negative charge. So therefore, what is left behind? Well, it has more positive charges, more protons than it has electrons. So we say it has a positive charge. To show that it has a positive charge, we add a bracket, a square bracket like this, and we just write down the charge here. This is to show that it is an ion and not a neutral atom. Let's look at a different example. Let's look at oxygen. So oxygen, again, I'm going to look at my periodic table and I see that it has 8 electrons. So the first shell, I can do 2 electrons. The second shell is going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 electrons. If I wanted to, I could do the electron configuration, which is 2, 6. Now, how is this going to form an ion? Well, what's the easiest way to make it have a full outer shell? It could lose 6 electrons, and that would be one way of forming an ion. But actually, it's far easier to just add 2 electrons to it in order to make the outer shell have 8 electrons and therefore be full. So we're actually going to add 2 electrons this time. Now we've added 2 electrons. Electrons have a negative charge, so we're going to show that it has a negative charge by drawing these square brackets and writing our negative charge here. Because it's gained 2 electrons, we have to write a 2 minus. So the question is, how do you know whether it's going to lose electrons or add electrons? Well, in order to answer that, you basically just use, a bit of common sense. What's the quickest and easiest way for it to form an ion? And think about it that way. So here we can lose 1. It would be far harder for it to gain 7 electrons. Here we could lose 6, but it's far easier to only gain 2. So let's look at a couple more examples. Let's look at nitrogen. So on my periodic table, I can look at nitrogen. I see that it has 7 electrons. So again, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I wanted to write the electron configuration, I could write it like this. So how does this form an ion? Well, it always wants a full outer shell. It could lose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but actually it's far easier for it to gain 1, 2, 3. And end up with a full outer shell like this. So it's gained 3 electrons, so it's going to have a -3 charge like this. We'll do one more example. Let's look at boron. So boron, if I look at my periodic table, has 5 electrons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Electron configuration 2, 3. How can it form an ion? Well, I could gain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to have a full outer shell, but actually it's far easier to just lose 3 electrons and become boron with just 2, and it's lost 3 electrons, so it has a positive 3 charge. Join me in the second video where we will look at ionic bonding.